Welcome to episode 2 of the Nova Hoopcast. Brian and Kevin back with you. We're here at Wakefield High School, home of the Warriors. Before we start talking about this week in basketball, we had a chance earlier today to talk to Tony Bentley, Coach Tony Bentley, and his right-hand man, Coach Horace Buck Willis. So, Buster, let's go ahead and roll that video. Okay, we've talked since we started this podcast a couple years ago, and really since we started the YouTube channel, about wanting to come to Wakefield. So we're finally here with Coach Tony Bentley and his right-hand man, Horace Buck Willis. Thanks so much for having us here.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful facility. I think it's one of the best venues
no question.
throughout Northern Virginia. You're a little biased, but maybe tell us what it's like. We've experienced it, but what's it like on a Friday night big game in this environment?
It is something to see. We've been here now, I think it's 7 years in this building, and as you can see with the glass, and you look down, we sit down low, and on a packed night on a Friday night, you've got people standing up at the windows, and it's no other place to be on a Friday night but here at Wakefield.
Yeah, such a cool, when you walk down into the gym, you mentioned it has a little bit of a college feel to it as well.
It does, and I like the fact that no one actually really touches the floor, because the way you come in, you come down, you go back out. So only the players and people are down on the floor, but it's a special place to be.
True high school basketball, Coach, nobody else can touch the floor. That's an issue at every high school.
Yes.
Kevin, I know you've seen a lot of games here.
I love coming here. I come for the Christmas tournament every year, and then Brian and I have come for Fall League that these guys have put on for the last couple of years. But my question has to do with the community here at Wakefield. It's a special place. Tell us what it means for you guys to be here as coaches and as mentors. And you've been here for a long time now.
Yeah. You want to take that?
You got that.
Well, I think this is our 18th year here at Wakefield, but we're both community guys. We grew up here. We actually both went to Washington Lee.
Not Washington Liberty,
Washington,
right? We
Washington
won't ask
Lee.
about that.
But the community here is, we knew it growing up. It's a special place because the fans are more of we call them the old heads. The old heads are here more than our student section, and they really want Wakefield, to win yesterday. So it's a lot of tradition and history. Taking over this job, we knew what we were getting into when we got the job because of the fact we grew up in the neighborhood. We've been here so long, we're coaching kids who we went to school with their parents, things like that. So we're getting old. It's gray hair up here, but it's a great community to be in, and blessed to be the coaches here at Wakefield.
Buck, you sat right next to Coach Bentley the entire time.
Absolutely.
And seen him build this whole program and been a big part of it as well. Talk about what you've seen over the last 17, 18 years.
I've seen some great seasons here. I've seen some ups, some downs, some highs, some lows. But overall, I think we're headed in the right direction as far as building the tradition of Wakefield basketball that I grew up on, coming to watch Wakefield play when Coach Bob Belgian was here, and how I saw those guys as a family.
Right.
I mean, everything that they did 15 guys, movies,
together.
Everything was in the community. If we're eating lunch, and we tried to install that same program here that we saw growing up. And I think with this guy, it's been a long 18 years.
But that's just 18 years here.
Yeah, but
we did 9 years together at Washington Lee. So
but just our friendship. It's great. I'll go on the sideline sometimes, and he's, "Fuck you, you need that." and I tell him, I said, "Okay, you know what? You're the head coach. You can take over at any point, any time before this game."
Exactly.
So, it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't happen overnight. You're talking about relationships that have been going on for years and years in a community that's a special place. I know that we just found out that Buck is the second all-time leading scorer at Washington Lee, which is pretty cool. Tony Stanley being the number one guy over there, Washington and Liberty, but we'll still call Washington Lee for your sakes. But very special place. You guys have had a ton of success. You do some things that people don't do, like the Fall League. You've just taken a trip to Utah. I want to know a little bit about that trip. How did you get to Utah?
So this is our 3rd year going to Utah, and I work for a company, shameless plug, but ProLook Sports. And so we have been going out there. ProLook has now taken over the tournament in Utah. Used to be the Vivid Great Western Shootout, and the owners of ProLook have taken over the tournament and have invited us to come out. We play against some of the top teams in the country, Wasatch Academy, Lone Peak High School. These are teams that, if you go back and look, have traditionally had NBA players. And so we go out there, and it's a different style of basketball. But to take a public school to get on a plane on the East Coast, to fly to the West Coast to play in the basketball tournament. I think it's very special. This year we had a kid who had never been on a plane before, and when the plane took off, he started screaming like a little girl, when the plane went up in the air. So it's just the memories. Forget about the wins and losses, because we did get our butts kicked out there.
Yeah, I didn't think you had a whole lot of success.
No, not a success as far as on the court.
Right,
but as you know, as a longtime coach, the success was that trip and that brotherhood, the bonding that the kids did together is what it's all worth. And we're trying to get that together and to look back on that tournament in February and to draw from it.
Right.
Coach, talking about this year's team, I know you got your first win last night
Yes.
at Annandale, and that was more than just another game,
Yeah.
playing against one of your former assistants.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
And player, right?
Yeah. Not only Coach Willis and I, we've starting to coach guys now. They're coming to coach, but
Right.
Dietrich Gilreath is one of our guys. Not only is he a former player, former assistant, but he's my godson.
Right.
So for the first time having to go, I know what it felt like, because when I had to coach against Bobby Dobson for the first time, it was nerve-wracking to see my mentor on the other sideline. So I know for Dietrich last night it was tough for him, but
Right.
I told him, like we talked last night, we needed a win. So I didn't care who was it against.
Exactly.
We needed a win. It was nothing personal. I love Dietrich, but we needed a win. And I think the kids came out, last night and played really strong last night.
How about the future for this year's team? We've talked a lot about your tradition, but I know you're concerned about, tomorrow and the next day and next week. What do you see going forward for this year's team?
We have a long way to go. We don't have a lot of experience. We graduated a lot, so this year we're trying to find our identity. Coach Willis will tell you that we try to stick to the same script, but when you have different players, you got to switch some things up a little bit. So with that being said, we've got a lot of guys that actually are buying in to what we're trying to do, but we got a long way to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I do think you guys have a good chance this year in your district.
Yeah.
I think it's wide open. Marshall lost some really good players. Edison's playing well. It's going to be
Yes.
tough, but I think you guys are going to be in the mix. And I think it's because of all the things we've talked about. You guys have the tradition. You have the culture. And I think once those kids buy into it, I think that sort of feeds itself. And I think you will be there at the end. It'll be fun to watch. I know that Brian and I have tried to get into playoff games. We were talking about trying to get into the Potomac game here a couple of years ago, where we just gave up because we were out on the street waiting in line thinking there's no way. We ended up heading over to Robinson, but we wanted to be in a game like that night, and we hope you guys have some good games like this and put some more banners up on the wall.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, before we let you go, maybe a question for both of you, since you guys have been now doing it for quite a while. I'll start with Buck, and then Tony, you can answer. What have you seen that's changed in the game over the years? You guys have been coaching together for a long time. You've been in the AAU scene and all of that, personal trainers. What have you seen changed over the years?
I've seen the youth change.
Yeah.
And it's heart-wrenching to see how the game of basketball has evolved to I'm just a three-point shooter, and every shot has to be a three.
Yeah.
I sit down with my son and I watch the NBA. I watch it for about 2 minutes.
Right.
And I go, son, this is entertainment. This is
right.
what it is. So I think the attitude, as far as loving the game, has changed. There's a lot of desire. I want to do it, but you don't put the hard work in to show what you're about. So, I mean, it's definitely changing. I mean, I come in every day and I go, whew, 3 more years, Billy. 3 more years.
Yeah, right.
I don't think Tony's going to let you say that.
Right. Tony, what about you?
I just think the same thing you said. I think with the addition of these trainers now, there's a lot of kids who we call drill guys.
Yeah.
You put a cone out there, man, they look good.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get a road defense out there, it's a little bit different. And then also, too, I've seen the years, knock with the parents.
Yeah.
You have.
That sounds like a knock.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's true. I mean, it's just reality of the money and the time that people are putting in.
Yeah, and I'd say it every year because we're both parents, and your child is Michael Jordan, and I have to say now LeBron James because they don't even remember Michael Jordan.
Right.
But your child at 8, 9 years old is the Michael Jordan of the team, and they're the best players. But by the time they get to high school, other kids have caught up, and the parent can't see that their son is not the best anymore. And so now, it's a little bit different with the parents, but I think the trainers, and I'm not knocking any trainers because there's some great trainers out there, but, just because you do some cone drills, sometimes it doesn't, equate to on the court if you're an experience. So just over the time you've seen that. But, I think a lot of coaches haven't changed, but, we just got to figure this out with the parents and just trusting in the coaches, but it'll never happen,
Right.
So
No,
you
you're
just
right.
keep doing what we need to do.
Yeah,
I
that
got
ship
one
has
quick
sailed.
question, because I know we need to move on. We asked this starting last year when we go out to visit coaches and go to different gyms. Where do we need to eat lunch here
Yes.
in Arlington?
The
And
most
I know
important
Kevin,
question.
I know Buster's got an answer, but what do you guys say?
Well, I can tell you right now, since 1959, the broiler.
That's what Kevin said.
It's not even a
That's what
question.
Kevin said.
I think we just had lunch there
We
yesterday.
have
The brother.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going
yeah.
going to Wakefield, but we're
I hope
stopping
you
there.
gotta take it to
Okay.
the broiler.
All right.
It's changed a little bit, new ownership, but the broiler is the broiler.
All right.
You got guys coming through and they're posting stuff on Facebook. Where am I? And they got a picture of the pizza or the steak and cheese. It is a staple here in Arlington
All
County,
right.
the broiler.
That's what we need
You
to
already
know.
Yeah, let's wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
So, hey, Tony Bentley, Buck Willis, thanks so much for having us down
Thank
here.
you.
Great,
Thank
great
you.
environment.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome stuff from Coach Bentley and Buck, and it's really cool to be here, Kevin. We've talked about it for a couple of years. I'm glad we're finally able to make it happen.
And what we like about Wakefield is the history. Let's be honest. It's been a big part of Northern Virginia basketball for a long time. We've been around for a long time, so we just enjoy the history. And talking to Coach Bentley and Coach Willis is just taking us back to players that we remember when we were coaching. And it's just an amazing feel here. And I think if you haven't been here, you haven't been to a game, it's definitely need to check it out. If you're a Northern Virginia fan, it's kind of one of those places you got to come watch a game. And they do have some good games coming up in Christmas. I know I come here a lot to watch their tournaments, so maybe come on and check a game, but great program, great history.
Yeah, it's more than just a basketball game. It's an event when you come here on a Friday night rivalry.
They have the
game.
DJs?
Yeah.
I know you played here on Friday.
They didn't have one this Friday, but I'm sure.
It'll be back.
Yeah, it'll
It'll
back. And you know what? In addition to that, Kevin, just listening to Buck and Tony, even Busta grew up in this area. Just hearing them talk about Arlington history, even outside of basketball,
Yeah.
is really cool.
And I don't want to pick on Loudon because I live in Loudon and I've lived there my whole life, but there's very few places that are like that.
Right.
In Loudon. You do have some people who lived in Sterling or in Leesburg and definitely in Western Loudon, but because it's been here so long, it's really part of the fabric of this area and this community, and it means a lot to the coaches
Yeah.
that have been here, like Tony and Buck. So
Right.
a lot of fun to talk to them and go back down memory lane.
Yeah, and they've been together for a long time. They've
Yes.
been together for,
The old
this is their
married couple.
18th year here, and then they were together coaching on the JV
9
level, I
years?
think, at Washington Lee.
Yeah,
So,
Bobby Dobson.
probably one of the keys to their success is having that continuity on the coaching
No question,
staff.
no
So,
question.
anyway, so if you've never been down to Wakefield to see a game, look at the schedule, try to pick out a good rivalry-type game, and get here early, and go to the Broiler for
That's what we heard.
for
That's the
lunch
place to
or
be.
dinner beforehand. So let's talk about the week. Maybe let's talk about some of the games of the past week, Kevin. I kind of highlighted a few, and I'll ask you to chime in,
course.
fill in some of the gaps, but some scores that caught my attention. Loudoun County over Stonebridge. The Siegel kid, what's his first name?
Mark Siegel.
He had 37 in that
He did
game.
have 37. He started his freshman year at Loudoun County High School and then went to a private school and then came back. A great addition for the Raiders. Had a big night with 37 points. He kind of picked off the slack for Matt Anderson, who didn't play that game, another great player for County. But a big night, 37 points. He can shoot the ball.
Right. Champ over Patriot, 61-56. I know you want to talk about some of the undefeated teams. Champ is one of them.
Yeah, and let's stop right there and talk
Right.
about undefeated teams because there's not a whole lot of them.
Right.
You've got Champ, who's undefeated. We'll talk a little bit about Yorktown and then South County. But for the number of schools that we cover and the few amount of games we played, I mean, most maybe teams that played are 5 or 6.
Right.
To only have 3 undefeated teams is
Yeah.
pretty amazing. Speaks to the parity that we're seeing across all 3 counties that we talked about.
Yeah, definitely parity, and as you mentioned earlier, there's not a dominant team. I mean, if you pick one at South County,
They're probably the closest.
but they're beatable, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes.
They're
but,
beatable. Oh, okay.
Uh-oh, is that gonna come back?
I don't know if anyone's
Hey.
watching, but yeah, I just try to mess with you a little bit. But I do think they're probably right now the team to
Right,
beat.
right.
But you're saying they're beatable. Interesting. Okay.
Well, and I would also say, like, if you have a decent team, just looking around at the scores and the parity, like, everybody has a chance right now.
Well, Hayfield, and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that. I was a game on Tuesday that was very, very close and won at the buzzer. by South County.
Oh, so maybe they're unbeatable.
They are
since they
are
had a buzzer
beatable.
beater to
Yeah,
get their win.
they are beatable. They are
Anyway,
beatable.
so that was another, some other scores. Let's move on. West Po, talking about that league, West Po beat Lake Braddock 76-61.
Yeah, I think
Great
a lot
win
of
for West
people were
Potomac.
expecting Lake Braddock maybe to win that game, but they have a great player in David Solomon. But West Potomac with a nice win.
So the South County buzzer beater you just mentioned, 62-59 over Hayfield, a three, really right at the buzzer.
Right.
Kind of heartbreaking loss for Hayfield. Madison over South Lake, 62-59.
I think that surprised some people.
Yeah.
I know that surprised the coach at
Right.
South Lakes. I talked to him last Friday when I
Right.
went to watch the game. Mike Desmond,
Right.
the coach at South Lakes, and he was saying how poorly they shot free throws. He
Yeah.
said that was a big difference for them. Not taking anything away from Madison, but he said we've got to shoot better free throws in order to beat teams, and that a big difference in that loss to Madison
Right.
on Tuesday.
Right. TC Wakefield was a great environment, 51-46 victory for TC over Wakefield.
Let me add one more on Tuesday.
All right, go ahead.
Osborne Park with Ethan Wilson,
Yeah.
one of the best scorers.
Yeah.
And Prince William had 29 that night as
Yeah.
they beat a solid Forest Park team.
Yeah.
So that was a good win for Osborne Park.
He's filling up the stat sheet, and I think he's more than just a scorer.
Mm-hmm.
Some other scores of note during the week, Loudoun County we mentioned earlier, not so much the result, but the score. They beat Freedom by 26.
Freedom starting a little bit slow. Last time we talked about Angelo Easter being injured and not being on the floor, but I was a little surprised about the loss, and especially about how big it was, a 77-51 loss to Loudoun County. But I think Freedom's going to get better. I think they're going to play better. They had a good win on Saturday in a tournament against Stafford.
Right.
They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Brian, let me chime in on some other games that happened on Wednesday. You had Heritage beating Woodgrove, Max Janis at Heritage High School going for a career-high 29. Also that night, Potomac Falls beat Broad Run with Landon Hawes, a real strong player for Potomac Falls, going for 30. And Prince William, Potomac beat Hayfield. Keith Henry, coach's son.
Right.
A couple sons coming through that program over at Potomac had 18 in the win over Hayfield. And then Riverside beat the newest school in Loudoun County. People joke that they build a school every year in Loudoun County, and they're pretty close.
Yeah.
They were led, Riverside was led in that win by Ty Reichert, who had 28. So a lot of points being scored on a Wednesday when there wasn't a whole lot of games.
What do you think about the defense that's played in Loudoun County, Kevin? We see a lot of high-scoring games by individuals out there.
Yeah, I will say that I do get a lot of grief from my friends in Fairfax about defense. They always question, what kind of defense are they playing out there? All the big scores are coming from out there. I can't explain it other than it happens. I don't know the difference between who's teaching, coaching defense, but there are a lot of points scored, and I will say that I've been given a lot of grief about being in Loudoun County that no one plays defense.
Right.
But these kids can definitely play, not taking anything away from them, of course.
They can. Let me throw out some scores from Friday. You can stop me if there's comments you want to make. Riverside with a nice win over Loudoun County, 51-49. Bo Everett getting it done for the Rams.
Definitely.
Here on Friday night, I was part of this game, Fairfax over Wakefield, 49-47. I think Coach Bentley would agree it was not a thing of beauty for either team. And Fairfax was up 8 with maybe 9 with 40-something seconds to go. And Wakefield ended up having about a 35 footer at the buzzer that would have won the game. But Fairfax survives 49-47.
And I think Fairfax losing that first game of the year to Osborne might have put them in another category in terms of being good. I think a lot of people thought Fairfax was going to be good, and then they lose to Osborne, so I think people are wondering. But I'm here to tell you, you guys are good. You're going to continue to get better. That's a good win at Wakefield. Win by 2, win by 20. Any win here on a Friday night's a good win. So Fairfax, team we're not really talking about because of that first loss, but I think we're going to start talking about them pretty soon.
Kevin, we're just trying to get better each day.
Don't give me that coaching stuff. Don't give me that stuff.
All right, Hayfield with a nice win over Edison, 62-51.
And Edison's first loss. Edison's
Yes,
first loss
you're
of
right.
the year. And that's
You're
a
right.
big rivalry game there. And I was talking to you before the broadcast that Hayfield's got a lot of rivals. They play TC, that's a
Yeah.
rival. They play Edison, that's a rival. They play
Right.
South County, that's a rival.
Yeah.
A lot of tough games for the Hawks, and they've struggled early on this year, but they've got a good big man in Daniel Peterson.
Right.
And they'll be there at the end, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
he's off to a good start.
Yep.
Freedom South Riding did beat Briar Woods, and then they beat Stafford, North Stafford.
Saturday.
Yeah, so maybe they're rounding into form a little bit. So here's a little bit of a shocker, and I know Jalen Coker did not play in
I
this
don't know
game.
why, but yeah, Jalen Coker for Potomac Falls.
I was going to text Coach Hawes on the way here, but didn't get around to it. I wouldn't do it while I was driving, but I would pull over and text him. Champ 82, Potomac Falls 52.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That is a little interesting, a little surprising, but Champ, one of our very few undefeated teams, led by Tyler Savage and the Jasper twins.
Right.
We don't know a whole lot about them because they played in the private school for their first couple of years, but they are at Champ now and playing well for Coach Webb. And we haven't talked a whole lot about Coach Webb at Champ, but he's done a good job.
Right.
They're off to a good start and a very good win for them over the traditional power in Loudoun County, Potomac Falls.
Right. Any other games for the week, or you want to
I
move
would say
into-
TJ gets a win over Mount Vernon, and they were led by Alex Yu with 28 points.
Nice.
Yeah. And they won in overtime. And then Langley with a win over Chantilly. I saw Langley play in Summer League over at Fairfax and West Springfield, and I think they're not real big, but they've got some kids who can shoot the ball. They were led by Jihan Sihat, who had 28 points. The last two games of the week I want to talk about is the Battle of the Panthers. Potomac Falls plays Potomac.
Right.
We've always talked about is a great game, and they played each other before in playoffs.
That should happen every year, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Two great programs, one in Prince William, Potomac, and then Potomac Falls and Loudoun. But the Potomac Panthers from Prince William did win that game, but of note, Landon Hawes with 37 points and 10 rebounds. So a monster game for him. Again, missing Jalen Coker, and who could have been the difference in that win. But they lose big time to Champ and come back the next night and have to play at Potomac and do well. That's a pretty good sign for Coach Hawes.
Yeah. I think Landon Hawes, not to cut you off there, he's right up there. Like, if maybe next week or the week after we can pick our top 5 players so far, he's right up. We've talked about David Solomon in the past, but Landon Hawes is off to a great start.
He is playing
Ethan
well.
Wilson's playing well for Osborne Park. But go ahead.
Last game is Loudoun Valley with their first loss of the season. They played in like a showcase game. They're kind of getting big where you go one day and they just have a bunch of games back to back. They lose to a good Teddy Roosevelt team, and they were led by Coach's son, Trent Dawson, who had 24 points. But that was their first loss as well. So we could have been talking about Edison being undefeated, Valley also being undefeated, but they both lose to very good teams this week. So really speaks to the parity.
Yeah. Maybe some games we saw during the week. I already mentioned the Wakefield Fairfax game. I saw Westfield play as well. It was their first game because they postponed the game due to football. Their football players weren't playing yet, but they've got 2 transfer brothers in.
One didn't play, I think.
One didn't play. I guess he's a football player maybe, but Kyle Whippen, who's about 6'6", super athletic kid. I was impressed with his game. Same Westfield character that we've seen in the past in terms of being physical, playing really hard, playing good defense. But Fairfax handled them pretty well. But again, it was their first time out, and they had Noah Kim and one of the Whippen boys and another boy on the sidelines.
And they'll make a
coming
difference.
from football, so they'll make a difference. I saw Centerville play again. I saw them against Heritage. They handled Heritage pretty well. I'm intrigued by Centerville.
Me too.
Because
I am intrigued.
They're kind of doing it a little bit by committee from a scoring standpoint. They've got Avery Ford, who's a difference maker, and I think sometimes he scores a lot, sometimes he doesn't, but he's a force. He's big, he's athletic. He's hard to score against because of his athletic ability. Mackay Washington was not playing yesterday. I don't know if he...
Those are 2 new players for the Wildcats.
Yeah, correct.
Right? Both new to Centerville this year.
So Mackay was on the bench in his warm-ups, so he must have had an injury or something like that. So, they're off to a nice start. And again, they've got some imposing size and physicality. Any other games you catch?
Well,
during
there's
the
only
week?
game that I want to see, and I want to show you something. I want to show you
Okay.
and Buster something.
Uh-oh, wait a minute.
I went to watch the South Lakes game at Marshall, and that was for a very personal reason. Coach Lynn, who's a friend of ours,
Former
player, played for me. We've talked about last show. He got the job at Marshall, and I got this phone call saying, this would be a great game to come to. It's his first home game. He's playing South Lakes, and it was a very special, and I want to show you why. I was given this shirt.
Take it off. Take it. Not that yellow.
This is
oh my gosh.
Buster,
What
can you
the
get
heck?
a good shot of that?
Oh,
It's my Jerry Lynn shirt, and I was fortunate to get one of the few that were given out, the athletic program.
Did you have to pay for that, or was it?
No,
Oh, okay.
no, I got it, and
So the athletic director had those made up?
yes.
Joe Swarm
Yeah,
at Marshall.
Fred's, he's very well liked at Marshall, so this was a highlight of my week to go watch Jerry, Coach Marshall. I wish I could say it went well for the Statesmen. Unfortunately, South Lakes played a great game. They have a lot of weapons. They shot very well from outside, and they had some size that I really didn't know about.
Oh, South Lakes?
South
Yeah.
Lakes does.
Yeah.
Jerome Scott, great player years ago at South Lakes, and Christy Winters Scott,
Right.
they're kind of South Lakes royalty.
Right.
Christy Winters played at Maryland and does a lot of announcing now for the Mystics, and Jerome Scott played in Miami. Great pedigree. Well, their son is a big player, big guy, and plays well. So they have some good size at South Lakes. They shot the ball real well. But the highlight, I mean, my shirt and being there to support Jerry. So I think South Lakes is a team that, when we talk about teams that are going to have a good season and we have our eye on, they're definitely one of those teams. They lost to Madison, but Madison's tricky. Coach Roller can do some things to take you out of your game. And then I mentioned Coach Desmond saying they didn't shoot free throws, but I think they're going to have a good year for sure.
Hassan Kurtu, is that the other big kid for South Lakes?
No, he didn't play that. He didn't play that night.
Oh,
I'm not sure
interesting.
why, but he did
Okay.
not play.
All right. Okay, cool. That shirt kind of leaves me speechless.
Yeah,
I
it's
really
kinda
don't
hard to
know-
take your eyes
I don't
off.
know what to say about that.
Yeah.
Are you
want
gonna
to
put the
stand up,
sweatshirt?
Buster? Yeah.
You gonna put the sweatshirt back on now?
I
Or
don't
are we
know.
gonna do the rest
Maybe
of
it's
the show like
distracting.
that?
I don't know. But
All right. Moving on, if we can somehow move on with Jerry staring at me. I was going to mention some teams that have kind of caught my eye. We've talked about a number of them already. Champ, you mentioned, is one of the few undefeated teams.
Yes.
I think Riverside.
they've got a good test.
Yeah.
They've got a good test coming
that?
up. They're at Potomac Falls on Friday.
Okay.
And if they can win that game, then I could definitely see they made a statement
Right,
in Loudoun County.
right.
That's a big hurdle for them. So that'll
Okay.
be an interesting game on Friday.
Here's one team we haven't mentioned, I don't think, yet in this episode, Yorktown.
Very close to where we are now, yeah.
Running up and down the floor. They had I think a program record in threes. They hit like 18 in a game the other day.
That's a lot of threes in a high school game.
They're off to a 5-0 start.
Like Riverside, they've got some games coming up that I'd like to see how they do. Because I think their strength of schedule early on, no offense to anyone, hasn't been as strong as some other teams. You look at who Hayfield's played, some of these other teams. I'd like to see what Yorktown can do next couple games, next week, next couple weeks.
Right. Other teams, we mentioned South Lakes, Madison, you just talked about, they're not at full health yet, I don't think, but Coach Roller's got them. They're another team when I think about, like what I said about Westfield, like they're going to, Westfield's going to play hard every time out, regardless of their talent level, they're going to play good defense. I look at Madison, and I know they're always going to play hard, and I know they're always going to execute, and then when their talent level is superior, they're going to be really, really good. You're going to be in for a battle every night that you face them. South County we've talked about before. I'm glad you brought up Potomac as well. They're off to a nice start. Any other teams?
Yeah, a couple
caught
teams
your eye?
in Prince William. We mentioned Ethan Wilson at Osborne Park. I think Coach Coleman's doing a great job there. They're racking up the wins. Last year they were really close, and they had some good games, but now they're kind of seeing the hard work pay off, and they've got some wins.
Right.
And then Battlefield is one of those usual suspects that we haven't really talked about this
Right,
year.
right.
They lost early on. They only have one loss
Yeah, I
to a
noticed that.
Goodbriar Woods
Yeah,
team by
yeah.
2 at the Freedom Tip-Off Tournament, but between Battlefield and Osborne Park, and you talk about the other teams in that Cedar Run district with Patriot and Osborne and Stonewall Jackson, that Cedar Run district is going to be very interesting this year.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, in my mind, Battlefield is maybe a little bit under the radar this year. I think we've talked about them a lot the past couple of years, and they've had some quote-unquote higher profile kids, and maybe
Will come and go. They've had,
you're right.
and
Transfer out, transfer back in.
We talked to Tony Bentley about that.
Yeah.
If you're going to coach in this area long enough, you're going to have kids come and go. And
Right.
he had some kids leave, and Carter Swenson is a good kid,
Yeah.
a very good point guard that played
Right.
for Stonebridge last year that's back at Battlefield. He's having a good year for them. So Battlefield's a team that I also want to mention. And then we talked about Centerville and Loudon Valley, both very good teams that are going to have good years as well. But it makes it fun.
Yeah,
It makes a lot
absolutely. Some upcoming games, Kevin, I'm just going to throw them out there. Madison Osborne, I think, again, two well-coached teams. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Freedom South Riding and Patriot. Marshall Madison, a long-time rivalry game.
Wednesday rivalry game, yeah.
You know, Marshall still lost so much from last year, but to a certain extent, you know, you kind of throw out the records and all that when those two teams play. That's always a fun environment. Potomac Falls is playing Riverside and also playing Dominion. I think those are a couple good battles.
Very good games. Rivalry there against Dominion. Then I mentioned Riverside needing that win to kind of show how good they are this year.
Right.
That'll be important for them.
Braddock and South Lakes, that should be a great matchup. Interesting to see. Traditionally, South Lakes, I don't think would ever try to slow Braddock down. I think they might this time, or they might just go head to head.
I think
It'll be
it's,
interesting.
I saw pull-up threes a lot on Friday night, so I
Right.
don't think Coach Desmond's slowing down at all.
We've also got a West Po South Lakes matchup, so South Lakes has a couple really interesting matchups coming up in the next week.
Got a couple ones as well. Battlefield at South County. That's a good one.
Yep,
McLean,
yep.
Centerville, Briarwoods, Champ, Woodbridge, Annandale. Curious to see how that goes.
Right.
And then Patriot and SoCo are playing again
Yeah.
as well. So South County not shying away from good competition early
No.
on in the year.
Yeah. All right, changing gears, Kevin, your wild card is right here in full display.
Oh yeah, I had to.
I was trying to think of, was there anything else I wanted to bring up? And so I'm a little bit intrigued, a little bit amused. Social media obviously has changed the whole world, basketball world included. It seems like after every game, I see a picture of somebody in a locker room with a hard hat on or a sledgehammer. Fairfax does the little lunch pail, lunch bucket.
Board man, have you seen
Yeah,
that?
I've seen
Holding
the
a
board man, I've seen the
That's Robinson,
lockdown.
yeah.
I'm just intrigued, I don't know. It kind of makes me laugh. It seems like every team does something like that. So I think I've got a lot of ideas, but we might give participation certificates to all of our players after a game and just take a picture
You're
and put it
being
on social
cynical, old
media.
man.
I might
Being
be.
cynical, old
I
man.
know,
I
but
think this is what
it's kind
the
of
kids
funny.
like. They see the U on there with the turnover chain, or you know, and I know Fairfax had the charge chain last year. I know that a lot of schools
We had a
did.
charge chain last
Yeah,
year?
Yeah,
At Fairfax?
yeah. I think
I
so.
must not have been paying attention.
Yeah, or
to
maybe
the
it was the
locker
year
room after
before.
game.
But a
It
lot of,
might
I
have
think
been
it's
afterwards.
if it works for your kids, it's worth doing. I mean, that's just the way life is. And the kids will buy into it. If they think it's silly and they don't, then don't do it. But if they buy into it, whatever works, man. You're
I don't
coaching.
know. I think I probably should have brought a hard hat today.
And your lunch pail.
I'm gonna have a hard hat and a lunch pail.
What's wrong? What's wrong with it, Brian?
Hey,
Explain to
I'm
me.
all about recognizing.
Do you
the
just think
kids.
it's a little bit saturated? Too many people
Yeah, it
have
is. It is.
Okay.
And you know what? I guess maybe part of it is that it's got to be on social media after every game. Like,
Well, if it's not on social media, it doesn't
it didn't.
exist.
If
it didn't happen.
If it's not on social media, it didn't happen.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
I got you. All right. I guess I'm just being an old man.
I think you are being a little bit of old man. I'm all for it. Whatever works for your team, and maybe it's the spark that you need. I don't know. I think you do what you got to do when you're coaching, and I don't worry about it too much.
I'm having trouble taking anything you say seriously right now, and I can't put a finger on why that is.
My
Jerry, any final words for us before we sign off for the week?
We need to get Jerry next week for our Christmas show and get him the small Santa hat that made him very famous with the very few people that watch our show. So
It
we're
has.
going to have to get him next week.
We've probably got more comments on that than anything else we've done.
No question. And one last question, mentioning Jerry, or not question, but comment about Jerry. It was really cool the other night to be in the gym watching Jerry, an assistant who's been around Northern Virginia basketball for a long time, but also Mike Desmond, who played at Chantilly, coached at Chantilly, longtime assistant at South Lakes. Those two guys earned their stripes, deserve to be on that floor, and we're doing a great job. I'm sure they wanted head coaching jobs a lot before that, many years
Yeah.
prior, but they took their time, they had to wait, and they looked great, and they did a phenomenal job. So for someone who's seen coaches, wait their turn like it used to be, I kind of feel like, people used to.
You sound like the old guy now.
Yeah, I do. I feel like for a while the culture was, I graduated college, I coached freshmen for 2 years, I'm ready to be a head coach. And I never felt like you got the full experience. I felt like those coaches came and went very quickly because they didn't understand it. But these two guys at South Lakes and Marshall definitely put in their time, and I think are built to last. I think they'll be at those programs for some
Yeah,
time.
I couldn't agree with you more, and the only thing I would add is I would say those guys have both been around multiple coaches and multiple programs, which I think, you know, the more people you're around, the more you learn, the better prepared you are. So that's kind of cool to see the two of them coach against each other.
Yes.
Over there at Marshall.
So Christmas show next week.
All right, Christmas show next week. We'll have to break out you've got all that stuff in the box.
No, that's
somewhere.
Buster. That's
Oh,
Buster.
okay.
He's
All
a
right,
producer.
good. We
He's
probably got to
got-
get some new props for this year too.
Just bring the small hat, Buster.
Anyway,
All right,
hey,
good show. Thanks, Buster.
thanks again to Tony Bentley and,
He's
and
up here
Buck
walking around.
for having us here at Wakefield. Again, great historic venues. Thanks for tuning in. We'll look forward to seeing you on our Christmas show next week.